Hey guys, it's Woodrow here, and we're talking about bees. And here's a honeybee from one of my beehives. And today's video is going to be talking about the bee's life cycle and what they all go through and how it's changed through the seasons. So let's sit down and let's talk about some of the cool things about honeybees. So if you look at this honeybee, it's furry, and that's used for pollen, and its hair is almost like when you get clothes out of a dryer and you feel static electricity. The bee, when it lands on a flower, the static electricity will adhere to the pollen there. Now, the bee also breathes through its skin, and it has a tongue similar to like a straw. And you'll see that bee, he'll fly away here in a minute. But let's talk about the life cycle of the bee. So, the life cycle of the bee is 21 days to hatch. The queen lays an egg right here, and and then in 3 days, that egg goes into a larvae, and the bees feed that larvae pollen that they bring in from their pollen sacs. Then that larvae grows, and as it eats royal jelly, which is digested pollen, day 7 they cap it. And I will show y'all some of that here in a minute for my beehives. From day 7 to day 21, it goes through metamorphosis, just like the butterfly and the that we learned about in school. The larvae will change into the bee, and on day 21, it hatches out as a bee. Now, there's that bee still crawling on me. This bee, in the summertime of July, will live about 21 to 25 days. But in the wintertime, they live 160 days around, depends on the season and the temperature. So the bee's life cycle changes through the seasons. It has a longer life in the winter, and it has a shorter life in the peak of summer. So let's look at some of the pollen and the metamorphosis that we pulled out of a beehive. Here you can see pollen. Now this is pollen that came from comb, and that pollen is from flowers just like this, and the bees eat that pollen to feed the baby larvae through its life. Think about pollen and nectar as two different things. When you think about bees, they're vegetarians. But bees' vegetarian meals are nectar and pollen. Think about nectar being their beer and pollen being their bread. They have to eat that bread to feed their baby larvae, which is pollen. And we'll take some of the pollen out now, let you see it. Now I live in Comanche County, and I'm taking some tweezers here, and you can see that pollen here. That's all pollen. Now, these are all baby bees, and just like in that photo, the bee is capped right here. That is the capping. You see that line? This is the capping too. Now, we can see the pollens next to the babies. That way they can eat the pollen and feed the babies. Now, the babies come out head first. So if we take one of these cappings off, like right here, and start digging in, let's look at this one here. Start digging in some of these cappings, we can pull out different stages of metamorphosis. So here is a baby larvae that's going through changes right here. But if we come over here and pick up another piece, so that was like at day 7 or 8, we come over here, we can see some of these coming out here. There we go. Well, I'm trying. And there's a baby bee right there. All right, so we're back at it. So the bee, I set the diagrams up. It has a honey stomach. You can see that honey stomach right here. And as that bee flies around and lands on a flower, its tongue will come out and suck up nectar off the flower. Now, that bee has a honey stomach that expands to 8 times its size. So imagine when you're drinking and you can drink 8 cups of water, and then you go back to your house and you regurgitate that water into a honeycomb. And this is what we have here, is the comb. Now, this is empty comb that used to have honey in it. And you can see how it's just white and hollow. Now the bees make this comb, wax comb, bees wax, and they go back after eating the flower or drinking nectar or pollen, and either they pack the cell, the wax cell, with pollen, or they regurgitate from their honey stomach that we see right here, the nectar that they brought back from the flower. Now at that time, nectar has a lot of moisture in it and it needs to be dehydrated and fanned to make into honey. Now bees bring honey and pollen back to live through the winter. Here pretty soon in November, we'll have our first frost. And when the frost comes, the flower will fade away and there will be no more flowers for the bees. So the pollen and nectar is their food to make it through the winter. That's why, one of the reasons why honey has a really long shelf life and never goes bad. So winter comes, and right before winter comes, something happens in the beehive. The beehive realizes they do not need men, and it's kind of like a little nature's divorce happens. About sometime in October, the bees will tell all the males, you cannot stay here anymore. They will stop producing male bees. And in the wintertime, they'll have nothing but female bees 100%. Towards the beginning of spring, they'll start making male bees again. And then the male bees will come back. But in the wintertime, it's 100% female. So the bee, what we see when it lays the egg, and then on day 3, the egg hatches into the larvae, and then the larvae then is fed the pollen, and then the pollen feeds the larvae, and the larvae then turns into metamorphosis into a bee, and on day 21 it flies away. Well, it doesn't really fly away. I didn't take that back. It becomes a house cleaning bee. When the bee first hatches out of its cell, it has to clean its cell and help clean other cells and do housekeeping around the beehive. And then it becomes a nurse bee, and that nurse bee takes care of and feeds larvae. So that bee on that second right here, that is a nurse bee feeding larvae and kind of being a nanny to the baby larvae. Then it becomes a foraging bee, and it goes and brings nectar and pollen back to the beehive, and then it becomes a guard bee / forager bee. It does both. It will stay guard at the entrance. So usually in the beehive, the beehives that are guarding the beehive are the oldest of the bees, and then its life will fade off. And as we talked about, in the summer, they live about 25 days, and then in the winter, they live 160 days. And those days vary, so as the seasons change. So one of the interesting things about bees is that there's a queen, and in that queen, the colony determines when there's a new queen. So in some ways, we'd say that she's more like a president. The colony will see that, hey, we're too crowded, we need to make a new queen, or the queen's sick, or there could be some other issues, like we're getting robbed by other beehives. So the colony will then choose to make a new queen. The new queen stays with the beehive, but the old queen takes 50% of the beehive and finds a new home. And that's when you see those clumps of bees on a tree limb or on somebody's wall, and you see a big ball of bees hanging out. That is a swarm. So let's talk about nectar. So here we have another frame of honey, and you can see how this one is empty and this one is full. Honey is capped so they can live on through the winter. And you can see how this one here is built into the frame. The bees make their own wax by consuming honey. And on the bottom of their bellies, they have wax glands. They consume honey, their body produces wax, and then they mold the comb to build it. So when this frame was put into the box, all that wax wasn't there. The bees consumed honey and then built the wax. I don't want to make a really long video. I just want to talk a little bit about bees so it doesn't get too boring for y'all. But I also want y'all to know the queen bee is twice the size. So there's the queen bee, a drone bee is there, and then the worker bee. The queen bee lays all the eggs. In the peak of summer, she can lay up to 2,000 eggs. And then in the wintertime, when it's really cold, she stops laying eggs. They have to keep the larvae, the eggs, in this situation from beginning to end between 93 and 94 degrees. That will allow metamorphosis to happen. So if it's really hot, say 100 degrees outside in Texas, they're bringing in cool water to cool the beehive. If it's really cold, they're surrounding the beehive and keeping it warm by flexing its muscles. And that's why you can always find a beehive through a thermal scope. A thermal scope will pick up the heat registration of the beehive. I don't want to go too far into this and bore y'all with all the other stuff. But if you like this video and a little knowledge about bees, give a comment and go to my YouTube page at Happy Hornet Farms, where you can see more content like this. I just like to have other people have knowledge about nature, that not everybody's wanting to be a beekeeper, but everybody's a little interested in bees. So thanks for watching, and let me know what you think. And if you'd like to see more videos like this, I'd like to give them out. So this is Woodrow at Happy Hornet Farms, and y'all have a blessed day. See y'all later.